The sheriff's cruiser screamed up the gravel drive like a banshee in the dead of night, lights flashing red and blue across the cottonwoods, shattering the quiet hum of cicadas that had lulled the ranch to sleep. Kyle froze mid-stride on the porch, his coffee mug slipping from numb fingers to shatter against the warped pine boards, as the woman's voice, shrill, venomous, cut through the chaos from the fence line. "That's him. Arrest that deviant for corrupting the neighborhood." And in that instant, as the dust settled and the world narrowed to the barrel of a flashlight blinding his eyes, Kyle realized the fragile peace he'd built on this patch of Wyoming earth was crumbling under the weight of one neighbor's unyielding hate. He'd come out here 5 years ago, chasing ghosts of a life left behind in the concrete canyons of Chicago, trading boardroom suits for boot leather and the endless sky. The guest ranch, Eagle's Rest, he called it, was his redemption. A haven for city folk weary of their own noise, where he'd stitch up their egos with trail rides at dawn and stories round the fire pit as stars wheeled overhead. But tonight, with the law at his gate and that harpy from the HOA development 2 miles down the road pointing like he'd summoned the devil himself, Kyle felt the old scars rip open. The ones from a father who couldn't look him in the eye after the coming-out letter, the lover who'd bolted at the first whisper of commitment. This wasn't just a false alarm. It was war, declared by Evelyn Hargrove, the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek Estates, who'd decided his little slice of freedom was an affront to her picket fence paradise. Evelyn had been a thorn since the day Kyle broke ground, her petitions flying like confetti at a funeral. Zoning violations, noise complaints from the horses' whinnies, even a claim that his rainbow flag fluttering from the barn pole was littering with propaganda. But this, calling the sheriff on a Tuesday night because a group of guests, mostly queer folks seeking solace in the saddle, had dared to laugh too loud over Esmores? It was the match that lit the powder keg. As Deputy Ramirez stepped out, hand hovering near his holster, Kyle's heart hammered like a Mustang breaking free. "Evening, Kyle," the deputy drawled, voice thick with the reluctance of a man who'd fished trout with him last summer. "Mrs. Hargrove here says you're running an unauthorized operation, evicting guests without cause, she claims. Mind if we talk?" The air hung heavy with the scent of sagebrush and impending rain, and Kyle swallowed the bile rising in his throat. Eviction? The word twisted like a knife. These weren't tenants in some high-rise hell. They were souls he'd welcomed with open arms, charging next to nothing for a week of wide-open spaces where they could breathe without the world's judgment pressing down. There was Marcus, the accountant from Seattle nursing a breakup, who'd confessed over whiskey that he'd never held a man's hand in public. Lena, the artist from Austin sketching wildflowers while whispering about her wife's illness back home. And then there was Wesley, Wesley, the newcomer who'd arrived that afternoon on a rented Harley, all lean muscle and quiet storm, his duffel slung over one shoulder like he carried the weight of unspoken regrets. Kyle had caught his eye across the check-in corral, a spark igniting in the late sun. But now, with sirens echoing off the hills, that fragile what-if felt like a dream snatched away before it could take root. Wesley had pulled up in a cloud of dust, his leather jacket zipped against the chill wind whipping down from the Tetons, helmet tucked under his arm revealing hair the color of burnt caramel, tousled just enough to suggest he'd run his hands through it one too many times on the long ride from Denver. "Looking for a bed and some peace," he'd said, voice low and gravelly, like the rumble of the river after a thaw. Kyle had nodded, masking the jolt that hit him square in the chest. Those hazel eyes, flecked with gold, holding a depth that spoke of battles fought in silence. As he handed over the keys to cabin 3, their fingers brushed, and for a heartbeat, the ranch faded. No HOA busybodies, no endless repairs on sagging fences, just the electric hum of possibility between two men who'd learned to guard their hearts like prized stallions. But peace? That was a joke Evelyn Hargrove wouldn't let slide. She'd been watching from her McMansion perch ever since the first guest van rolled in, her binoculars glinting like accusations in the twilight. Kyle had ignored the anonymous letters at first. Sodom and Gomorrah at our doorstep. One read, postmarked from the Willow Creek HOA office she practically ran single-handedly. Then came the fines, the surveys claiming his property line encroached on her view corridor, the calls to the county about unpermitted gatherings every time he hosted a bonfire sing-along. It was harassment wrapped in bureaucracy, a slow poison meant to choke the life from Eagle's Rest. And tonight, with a bachelorette party of 5 lesbians from LA toasting their futures under the string lights, Evelyn had escalated, dialing 911 with tales of public indecency and illegal squatting, demanding the guests be rousted like trespassers on her turf. Deputy Ramirez cleared his throat, flipping open his notepad as Evelyn stormed forward. Her pearls clutched like a rosary, face flushed the color of the brake lights on her Cadillac Escalade. "Officer, this man's turning a respectable ranch into a den of sin. Those people out back, carousing like it's Mardi Gras. And him?" She jabbed a manicured finger at Kyle. "He's the ringleader, flaunting his lifestyle, evicting good Christians from their peace of mind." The word lifestyle landed like a slap, echoing the slurs Kyle had buried deep, the ones that had driven him west in the first place. He straightened, drawing on the steel forged from years of proving himself twice over. To skeptical investors, to doubting suppliers, to the mirror that sometimes showed a boy still scared of his own shadow. "Sheriff knows me, Evelyn," Kyle said evenly, though his pulse thrummed like a bowstring. "These folks are paying guests, legal as the sunrise. No evictions, no disturbances, unless you count your weekly drive-bys as neighborly." A murmur rippled from the cluster of cabins, where Wesley and the others had gathered, silhouettes against the fire's glow. Wesley stepped forward first, his presence a quiet anchor, shoulder-brushing Kyle's in a touch that said more than words. "I'm here." The deputy sighed, rubbing his jaw. "Ma'am, this is private property. Unless you've got evidence of a crime, we're not hauling anyone out. Might want to head home before this turns into a report on your end." Evelyn's eyes bulged, her tirade sputtering into threats of lawsuits and HOA bylaws. But as the cruiser pulled away, tail lights fading into the dark, Kyle felt the first crack in his armor give way. He turned to Wesley, the man's gaze steady, offering a half-smile that cut through the night like moonlight on snow. "Rough welcome," Wesley murmured, voice laced with that Denver drawl, close enough now that Kyle caught the faint scent of leather and pine soap. "You okay?" It was such a simple question, laced with the kind of care Kyle hadn't known in years, and in the answering nod something shifted. A bridge forming over the chasm of isolation he'd called home. The next morning dawned crisp, the kind of Wyoming blue that made you believe in second chances. Frost silvering the corrals as Kyle mucked out the stalls, his breath clouding in the chill. The guests had rallied at breakfast, plates piled with biscuits and gravy, laughter a defiant melody against the shadow Evelyn cast. Marcus clapped Kyle on the back. "Hell, man, you're like the gay John Wayne out here, holding the fort against the posse." Lena sketched a cartoon of Evelyn as a snarling witch on a napkin, passing it around to Chuckles. But it was Wesley who lingered after, volunteering to help with the fence repair, his hands sure on the hammer, driving nails with a rhythm that matched the unspoken sync between them. They worked side by side, the sun climbing to warm their shoulders, conversation easing in like a well-broken colt. Wesley was a graphic designer by trade, he'd said, escaping the grind of freelance deadlines and a city that chewed up dreams. "Had a partner once," he admitted, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. "But he wanted the white picket fence without the fence-sitters. Left me wondering if love's just another hustle." Kyle nodded, sharing fragments of his own unraveling. The corporate climb that hollowed him out, the night he drove west with nothing but a truck and a battered guitar, landing here to rebuild from the dirt up. "This place," he gestured to the rolling hills dotted with grazing mustangs. "It's my anchor, but anchors drag sometimes, especially when folks like Evelyn decide you're not fit to float." By midday, the fence stood strong, and they sat on a hay bale, sharing a thermos of black coffee, the world narrowing to the space between their knees. Wesley's laugh came easy when Kyle recounted a guest's disastrous roping lesson, and in that sound, Kyle glimpsed a future not shadowed by solitude. A hand to hold through the storms, a voice to harmonize with under the stars. But as they packed up, Evelyn's SUV crept along the county road, slow as a predator, her glare burning holes through the barbed wire. The harassment wasn't over. It was just beginning, a siege on the heart of what Kyle held dear. Weeks blurred into a tentative rhythm after that first showdown, the ranch pulsing with the quiet magic of autumn's turn. Aspens igniting in gold, the air crisp with the promise of first snow. Kyle threw himself into the routine, leading dawn patrols along the creek, where guests learned to read the land's whispers in the ripple of water over stones. Evenings mending tack by lantern light, the glow casting long shadows that danced like forgotten lovers. Wesley extended his stay, citing loose ends back home that could wait, and in the stolen hours between chores, they carved out moments that felt like grace. A shared ride up Rattlesnake Ridge, where Wesley's thigh pressed warm against Kyle's in the saddle, their silence companionable, laced with the thrill of words unsaid. It started small, those intimacies. A brush of knuckles over fence posts, a lingering gaze across the dinner table that made Kyle's chest ache with the sweetness of it. Wesley had a way of seeing him, not as the ranch hand with calloused palms and a guarded heart, but as the man beneath, the one who hummed Springsteen under his breath while branding irons cooled, who collected arrowheads from the creek bed like talismans against loss. One evening, as they scrubbed pots in the kitchen, suds foaming white against the sink, Wesley turned, water dripping from his forearms, and said, "You know, Kyle, this place, it's alive because of you. Not just the horses or the trails. It's the way you make folks feel like they belong." The words hung, vulnerable as a prayer, and Kyle, drying his hands on a towel, met his eyes. "Belong?" he echoed, the word foreign on his tongue after so long adrift. Their lips met then, tentative at first, a question answered in the salt of sweat and the faint taste of trail dust. A kiss that sealed the budding trust between them, soft and searching, like roots finding purchase in rocky soil. But Evelyn Hargrove was no patient weed. She was bindweed, choking the life from what bloomed. The complaints multiplied like jackrabbits. A certified letter accusing Kyle of nuisance odors from the cookouts. Another demanding soil tests for contaminants leaching into the watershed. Code, everyone knew, for her disdain of the undesirables he hosted. The HOA board, stacked with her cronies from the golf club set, voted unanimously to pursue enforcement actions. Hiring a lawyer whose billboards littered the interstate. Protect your property rights. Kyle's bank account, already stretched thin from a lean summer, groaned under the weight of legal fees for a zoning consultant. Guests whispered concerns. Would the magic hold, or would Evelyn's vendetta shutter the gates? But they stayed, drawn by the ranch's defiant warmth. The way Kyle's smile never faltered, even as shadows deepened under his eyes. Wesley saw it all, the toll-etching lines around Kyle's mouth, and stepped in without fanfare. Designing flyers for an upcoming fall festival to drum up bookings, his laptop glowing late into the night on the cabin porch. "We're in this," he'd say, pulling Kyle into an embrace that smelled of cedar shavings and resolve, their bodies fitting like puzzle pieces long separated. Nights deepened their bond, tangled in flannel sheets by the fireplace, whispers tracing vulnerabilities laid bare. The betrayal of Wesley's ex, who'd outed him to family for a shot at normalcy. Kyle's father, whose final letter arrived posthumously, a scrawled apology too late to mend the rift. In those confessions, love took root, fierce and fragile, a flame kindled against the gathering cold. Yet betrayal brewed closer than Kyle imagined, slithering in on the heels of old loyalties. Tom Riley, his ranch hand of 3 years, the grizzled vet who'd taught him to gentle colts with a whisper instead of a whip, had been fielding Evelyn's calls in secret. It started innocently, a coffee at the diner where she played the widow card, tears glistening over her latte. "Tom, you're a good Christian man. You see what he's doing to our community." Lies dripped like honeyed venom. Kyle was defaulting on loans, endangering the horses with neglect, turning the ranch into a front for illicit activities. Tom, whose own son had come out last spring and been met with stony silence at the family table, swallowed the bait. Doubt festered. Whispers to Evelyn about irregular guests and off-the-books cash became ammunition, fed back to the HOA's lawyer in affidavits that painted Kyle as a scofflaw. The blow landed on a frost-kissed November morning, as Kyle saddled up for a group ride, the sky a bruised purple threatening snow. Tom cornered him in the barn, Stetson clutched in meaty hands, eyes downcast like a dog awaiting the boot. "Boss, I talked to Evelyn." Didn't mean for it to go this far. But she said the county's comin' for an inspection. Full audit. You gotta clean this up. Kyle's world tilted, the curry brush slipping from his grip to clatter against the stall floor. Betrayal bloomed hot in his gut. Not rage but a hollow grief. For the trust shattered, the brotherly bond Tom had been, now poisoned by Evelyn's reach. Why? Kyle choked, voice raw as the wind scouring the peaks. After everything, the rides, the beers, the times I covered for your bad knee? Tom's shoulders slumped, mumbling about protectin' the ranch and family values. But the words rang false, echoes of Evelyn's scripture-twisted gospel. Wesley found him there an hour later, slumped on a bale, staring at nothing as the horses nickered softly. Without a word, he slid down beside him, arm draping heavy across Kyle's shoulders, a silent bulwark. He sold us out, Kyle murmured, the confession cracking open the dam. Tears came then, hot and unbidden, soaking Wesley's shirt as the man held him through the sobs, murmuring nonsense about stronger fences and clearer skies. In that vulnerability, their love solidified, no longer a spark but a steady burn. Wesley's hand cupping Kyle's jaw, thumb tracing the salt tracks, their foreheads pressed in a vow unspoken. We endure. The inspection loomed like a guillotine, but with Wesley's fire at his side, Kyle rose, dusting off the hurt, ready to fight for the ground that had claimed his soul. The HOA's eviction push hit fever pitch that week. Evelyn's Escalade a daily sentinel at the gate, her lawyer's cease and desist taped to the mailbox like a death warrant. Guests trickled in wary, tales of online smears. Eagle's Rest branded a havoc haven on neighborhood forums, chipping at bookings. Kyle pored over ledgers by lamplight, Wesley cross-legged on the rug, laptop open to mock-ups of a crowdfunding page. Save the ranch, where hearts find home. We'll tell our story, Wesley insisted, eyes fierce. Not the hate, the hope. Folks'll rally. And they did, in fits and starts. A viral post from Lena sharing her sketches, Marcus organizing a virtual auction of his firm's services. But Evelyn countered with a petition drive, door-to-door in Willow Creek, whipping up fears of property devaluation and moral decay. Her rhetoric a thinly veiled assault on the queer sanctuary Kyle had unwittingly built. Climax brewed in the marrow of a December gale, winds howling like banshees as snow blanketed the valleys. The county inspector arrived unannounced, clipboard in hand, Evelyn trailing like a vulture in pearls and parka. Mr. Hargroves filed for injunction, the man said, boots crunching ice in the yard. Claims you're operating without variance. Guests exceeding limits, structures unpermitted. Kyle's blood ran cold. Tom's leaks had mapped every vulnerability, from the unfiled shed addition to the cash-only trail fees that kept prices low for those in need. Wesley stood sentinel at the door, guests peering from windows, a united front against the intrusion. Evelyn seized the moment, voice slicing through the blizzard. See, this is what happens when you let them run wild. Evict them all, or the whole development suffers. Her fingers swept the group, Wesley arms crossed. The lesbians from LA, bundled in scarves. An elder couple from Boise, hands clasped in quiet solidarity. The word them ignited something primal in Kyle, a roar building from the depths. This is my home, he thundered, stepping forward, snow swirling like confetti in a storm. Not your fiefdom, Evelyn. These people aren't them. They're families, friends, folks healing from the same world that chews you up and spits out judgment. The inspector hesitated, pen hovering, as Wesley's voice joined, steady as granite. We've got records, photos, everything above board. But if you push this, you're not saving a neighborhood. You're shattering lives. Evelyn lunged, snatching a guest's scarf from the line as evidence of clutter, her tirade devolving into slurs that hung ugly in the air. Filth, perversion. In her frenzy, she swung wild, clipping the inspector's arm, papers scattering like leaves. Chaos erupted, guests shouting, wind whipping, until the inspector keyed his radio, voice clipped. Dispatch, need backup at Eagle's Rest. Possible assault on official. Sirens wailed anew, Not against Kyle this time, but converging on Evelyn as deputies cuffed her wrists, her howls of protest drowned by the gale. "Harassment, ma'am," one said, reading rights as snow dusted her bouffant. "Multiple counts. False reports, trespass, now this." She was hauled away, a spectacle shrinking in the cruiser's taillights, her empire of spite reduced to a mugshot waiting. In the aftermath, as the storm broke and stars pierced the clearing sky, Kyle and Wesley stood on the porch, arms entwined, the ranch exhaling in relief. The inspector's report cleared them. Tom's betrayal exposed in crosschecks, his resignation scrawled in shame the next day. Evelyn's arrest made local news, a footnote on HOA overreach, but for Kyle, it was liberation. The bank paused collections, donors flooded the fundraiser, guests booked solid through spring. Yet the true victory unfolded in quieter strokes. The elder couple's wedding under the cottonwoods, Wesley officiating with vows borrowed from their own shared dreams. Nights where Kyle traced constellations on Wesley's skin, naming them after the battles they'd won. Love, Kyle learned, wasn't the absence of betrayal or storm, but the choice to rebuild, plank by plank, heart by heart. Eagle's Rest endured, a beacon in the wide Wyoming nothing, where two men found not just home, but each other, humanity's quiet triumph over the tempests of fear. And in the end, as snowmelt fed the creeks come spring, Kyle hung a new sign at the gate. All are welcome, no exceptions. Evelyn faded to a cautionary tale, her Willow Creek perch sold to a young family flying their own flag of pride. For Kyle and Wesley, the ranch wasn't just land anymore. It was legacy, woven from conflict's threads into a tapestry of grace. Proof that even in America's fractured heartland, love could evict hate, one defiant dawn at a time. No, that can't be the end. Life doesn't wrap up in neat bows after a single blizzard's fury. The arrest was a spark? Sure, but embers smolder, and Evelyn Hargrove was the type to fan them into inferno given half a chance. Court dates loomed like thunderheads through January, her lawyer spinning the cuffs as excessive force against a concerned citizen, while Kyle's attorney, a sharp-as-a-tack queer woman from Jackson, filed countersuits for defamation, emotional distress, the works. The ranch hummed on, guests arriving in waves now, drawn by the buzz. Articles in the Casper Star-Tribune hailing Eagle's Rest as Wyoming's unlikely oasis. A podcast episode where Marcus spilled the tea on Karen versus Cowboys. Wesley dove deeper into the fray, his designs turning the fundraiser into a movement. Limited edition tees with slogans like Ranch Strong. Love the land, love who you are, proceeds stacking like cordwood against the legal blaze. Evenings, they'd pour over emails from supporters. A drag queen from San Francisco sending glitter-bombed care packages. A retired admiral from Virginia confessing his own hidden years. "See," Wesley would say, grinning over takeout Thai in the cabin, chopsticks clacking like applause. "You're not fighting alone anymore." Kyle would pull him close, the weight of it all easing in the circle of those arms, their kisses deepening from gratitude to hunger for the future. A life where mornings meant coffee shared on the porch, not crisis calls at dawn. But betrayal's shadow lingered, Tom's ghost haunting the empty bunkhouse. Kyle forgave in fits, mailing back the man's final paycheck with a note. "Horses need steady hands. Hearts need truth. Come back when you're ready." Tom didn't, vanishing to a spread in Montana, but the wound taught Kyle vigilance, not paranoia, but the wisdom to vet loyalties like hay. Test for rot before stacking high. New hands came. Rosa, a Latina vet tech with a laugh like thunder, and a knack for foaling. Jamal, a black ex-Marine whose trail stories rivaled Kyle's. They formed a crew unbreakable, toasting at the fire pit to "no more snakes in the stalls." February brought the hearing. A stuffy courthouse in Cheyenne, where the air smelled of old varnish and older grudges. Evelyn sat ramrod straight in the gallery, lips pursed like she'd swallowed lemons, her lawyer droning about community standards. Kyle took the stand, voice steady as the Platte River, recounting the calls, the letters, the night the sheriff rolled up to a backyard barbecue. "She wasn't protecting property," he said, meeting the judge's eye. A silver-haired woman with a rainbow pin on her lapel. "She was weaponizing it against people daring to live free." Wesley's testimony sealed it. His calm recounting of the scarf-swinging melee drawing gasps. Photos from guests' phones showed the chaos clear as day. The gavel fell like winter's end. Harassment charges stuck, fines levied. An order for Evelyn to cease contact or face jail. Her empire cracked. HOA president ousted in a recall vote. Whispers of lawsuits from neighbors she'd alienated long before Kyle's rainbow flag. She sold the McMansion in a fire sale, fleeing to Florida with tales of persecution. But Wyoming breathed easier without her glare. Kyle walked out into slushy streets, Wesley's hand in his, public, unapologetic. Their laughter echoing off brick walls, a sound purer than any verdict. Spring unfurled green and forgiving, meadows exploding in lupin and paintbrush, the ranch a riot of renewal. Kyle and Wesley made it official one equinox evening. No courthouse fuss but a circle of guests as witnesses, vows exchanged under the big sky. I choose you, through dust storms and betrayals, to build this life plank by honest plank. Rings glinted simple, silver bands etched with coordinates of the ranch's heart, and the kiss that followed tasted of wild honey and forever. Yet humanism's truest measure came not in victory's glow, but in the graces extended. Kyle reached out to Evelyn's estranged daughter, a quiet email sparking coffees in town. Stories traded of mothers who loved fierce but wrong. No redemption arc for the woman herself. She stewed in retirement venom. But in mending the fracture she left, Kyle found the story's soul. That we're all Karens sometimes, lashing from fear, and all cowboys too, roping our way back to light. The ranch thrived, a thread in America's patchwork. Guests from every corner, weaving tales that outlasted tempests. Kyle and Wesley, side by side on the porch swing as fireflies danced, knew the real arrest had been hate's, cuffed by love's unyielding grip. Summer scorched in like an old grudge, heat waves shimmering off the corrals, turning the air to liquid gold. Eagles rest its stride, bookings spilling over into shoulder season. The guest list a mosaic of lives intersecting. A trans teen from Tulsa learning to ride tall, his grin brighter than the noonday sun. A pair of dads from Philly, their adopted kids chasing butterflies through the wildflowers. Kyle orchestrated it all with the ease of a man reborn. His laughter freer now, Wesley's influence a steady current pulling him from the banks of self-doubt. They'd carved rituals into the days. Morning runs along the creek, where dew soaked their boots and birdsong drowned yesterday's noise. Lazy afternoons sketching maps for new trails. Wesley's pencil flying while Kyle spun yarns of Paiute legends gleaned from elders in town. Love, in its romance, was the poetry of the ordinary. Wesley's head on Kyle's lap during movie nights in the barn loft, projector flickering westerns on hay bales. Surprise picnics at Hidden Lake, where trout jumped silver arcs and confessions flowed like the water. Wesley's fear of roots, born from a childhood shuffled between foster homes. Kyle's ache for the family that might have been, softened now by the one they'd forged. But drama's undercurrent never fully ebbed. Evelyn's echo rippled in subtler forms. A letter arrived one July dusk, postmarked Orlando, her script spidery with age. You won the battle, boy, but the war for decency rages on. Pray you find God before it's too late. Kyle read it aloud to Wesley by the fire, their chuckles laced with pity more than poison. She's a relic, Wesley said, poking the embers. But relics remind us why we fight. They burned it then, ashes swirling up like released spirits, a small exorcism under the Milky Way. Conflict reignited from within that August, when a developer sniffed opportunity in the ranch's buzz. A slick operator from Denver eyeing expansion, pitching Kyle a buyout over steaks at the Longhorn Grill. Partner with us. The man schmoozed, tie too tight for Wyoming. HOA-proof condos, dude ranches for the elite, your name on the sign, fat check in pocket. Temptation gnawed. The ranch's roof leaked in 3 places. Vet bills piled from a colic scare, and whispers of Kyle's instability from Evelyn's old allies still soured supplier deals. Wesley caught the drift in Kyle's distant stares, confronting him over fence mending one sweat-drenched afternoon. This place isn't for sale, he said, hammer pausing mid-swing. Not to them, not to anyone who waters down what makes it ours. The argument that followed was their first real fracture, words flying sharp as barbed wire. Kyle accusing Wesley of naivety, blind to the grind. Wesley firing back that moneyed surrender betrayed the soul of Eagle's Rest, the haven for the overlooked. "Is this about the ranch or us?" Wesley demanded, voice cracking like dry earth. "You pulling away, 'cause it's easier than committing?" Kyle reeled, the betrayal sting fresh. Echoes of his ex's flight, Tom's duplicity. Storming off to the barn, where he punched shadows till knuckles bled. Hours later, Wesley found him there, slumped against a stall, and the reconciliation was raw poetry. Apologies murmured into shoulders, bodies pressed in urgent reaffirmation. Not lust but the desperate cling of souls afraid to lose. From that forge, their bond emerged tempered, deeper. Kyle turned down the offer, countering with a co-op model, local investors, community shares, securing the land's future without selling its heart. Romance bloomed in the mending. A weekend getaway to Yellowstone, geysers erupting like their passions renewed, hands intertwined on geothermal boardwalks, vows whispered amid bison herds. "You're my high country," Kyle told him one dawn, mist rising from the fire hole as they fished, line casting hope into the current. Autumn wove in with drama's final twist, a betrayal redeemed in the 11th hour. Tom reappeared, gaunt and grizzled, hat in hands at the gate as leaves cartwheeled gold. "Heard about the courts?" he mumbled, eyes on boots scuffed to ruin. "Evelyn, she got to me with lies about my boy. Said you'd turn him like some disease. Was wrong, Kyle. Dead wrong." The air thickened, old hurts surfacing like buried bones. But Kyle saw the plea beneath. The man's own wrestle with a son's truth. A father's fear transmuted to regret. Wesley, ever the bridge, nodded first. "Stalls need mucking. Grab a fork." Tom's return was probationary, labor laced with amends. Fences rebuilt, stories shared over coffee about his kids coming out barbecue. The pride swelling slow as spring thaw. Climax crested not in courtrooms but in community. A harvest festival Kyle and Wesley headlined. Hayrides through pumpkin patches. Queer fiddlers jamming under harvest moon. Tables groaning with elk chili and cornbread. Evelyn's shadow loomed faint. A protest flyer tacked to a post, her name in faded ink. But it dissolved in the crowd's roar, allies outnumbering foes tenfold. As dusk fell, Kyle took the mic, voice carrying over the bonfire's crackle. "This ranch ain't just dirt and dreams. It's us. Every scar, every stand, every love that says no to the eviction notices of the soul." Wesley joined him, arm round waist, and the cheers rose like a river breaking banks. The humanistic close unfolded in winter's quiet grip, snow blanketing sins past. Kyle and Wesley adopted a stray pup from town, a wiry mutt named Justice, who bounded through drifts with joy unscarred. Letters from Evelyn ceased, rumors of her softening in therapy circles, but redemption's arc bent toward the ranch. Guests proposing, friendships forged in saddles, a scholarship fund for queer youth in the trades. Love, in its romantic depth, was the emotion's core. Kyle waking to Wesley's breath warm on his neck, the world outside whatever it was, inside unbreakable. Eagle's Rest stood as testament. In America's vast, varied heart, where Karens call cops and cowboys call home, humanity prevails not in perfection, but persistence, the slow, stubborn bloom of grace amid the thorns. By the Ides of March, with mud season turning roads to chocolate rivers, the ranch pulsed with anticipatory hum. Calves bawling in the corrals, first crocuses poking defiant through slush. Kyle and Wesley had settled into a harmony that felt eternal, their partnership the ranch's unspoken backbone. Wesley handling the digital frontier, pixels turning testimonials into touchstones. Kyle the tactile pulse, dirt under nails translating to trust earned in every handshake. Romance wove through the mundane like wild vine. Notes tucked in lunch pails, thinking of your laugh at dawn. Dances in the kitchen to scratchy vinyl, Coulter wall crooning low as bodies swayed slow. Yet drama's embers, banked but not cold, flared when Evelyn's daughter, Becca, rolled up unannounced one rainy afternoon, her Prius caked in highway grime. Mid-30s, sharp-eyed with her mother's jaw but none of the acid. She clutched a manila envelope like contrition. "Dad's gone. Heart attack last fall," she said, voice threading thin over tea in the kitchen. "Found these in her attic. Petitions she drafted against you, but also letters to me, and signed, about fixing what she broke." Kyle listened, steam rising from mugs, Wesley's foot nudging his under the table. "I anchor in the swell." Becca spilled it. Evelyn's crusade rooted in her own ghosts, a brother lost to AIDS in the 80s. Grief twisted to rage at any echo of difference. "She saw you as the mirror she shattered," Becca whispered. "I'm sorry. For all of it." The betrayal's layers peeled back, not excusing but explaining. The hate as hollow armor over a heart hollowed by loss. Kyle, empathy his quiet superpower, invited her to stay. A cabin comped for reflection. Becca lingered a week, riding trails with guests, sketching wild rivers in her journal, thawing in the ranch's embrace. Her departure carried a check, not pity money, but seed for a memorial garden. Benches carved with names of those the epidemic stole, a space for healing where wildflowers ran rampant. "Tell her story, right?" she said at goodbye, hugging Kyle fierce. "The whole messy one." Wesley, watching from the porch, murmured later, "You're magic. You know that? Turning venom to violets." Conflict simmered anew in April's greening, when county lines redrew, whispered threats of rezoning, developers circling like coyotes scenting weakness. Kyle rallied the co-op, town halls packed with ranchers and allies, speeches thundering against cookie-cutter creep, swallowing soul. Wesley crafted the visuals. Maps overlaid with heritage sites, videos of kids on ponies under endless sky. The vote swung narrow, victory tasting of sweat and solidarity, but the close call etched lines deeper, reminders that freedom's a fence forever mending. Their love, amid the fray, deepened to romantic profundity. A vow renewal at solstice, just them and the peaks, words etched on birch bark. "In storms we stand, in sun we soar." Nights, they'd lie abed, justice curled at their feet, tracing futures in the dark. Adopting kids one day, maybe, or a book of ranch tales. Wesley's art illuminating Kyle's prose. Emotion swelled in these visions, tears pricking at the beauty of chosen family, the humanistic weave of flawed souls stitching whole. Betrayal's final echo came from within the co-op, a board member skimming funds, exposed in audit's glare. Kyle confronted him gentle, over bourbon in the tack room. "We build trust, or we build nothing." The man confessed, shame his chain, repaying with labor and lessons learned. No arrests, just amends, a humanistic pivot, grace over grudge. Climax crested in July's heat, a festival redux. Eagles Pride Week, trails lined with flags of every stripe, bonfires blazing stories into night. A storm hit mid-revelry, lightning cracking like judgment. But the crowd hunkered in the barn, fiddles unbowed, laughter a thunder of its own. As rain hammered tin roof, Kyle and Wesley slow danced in the hay-scented glow. Bodies close, hearts synced. A moment of pure romance, the world raging outside but irrelevant within. Resolution bloomed fallow and full, Evelyn's garden thriving, butterflies alighting on petals named for the lost. The ranch expanded modest, a bunkhouse for long-term artists in residence. Scholarships blooming for queer youth in AG trades. Kyle and Wesley, gray threading silver at temples now, watched from the swing as sun dipped low, Justice's successor pup yipping at fireflies. Love's arc, dramatic and deep, ended not in tragedy's tear but humanism's hush. Proof that in America's raw expanse, where Karens call and cowboys answer, eviction's true foe is the unyielding heart, romantic, resilient, forever home. Years folded like accordion bellows, each season exhaling change while the ranch's core held steadfast, timbers groaning under accumulated grace. Kyle and Wesley, now in their 40s, wore the land's patina. Sun-leathered skin, eyes crinkled from squinting at horizons both literal and longed for. Eagle's Rest had evolved into legend, a way station in Wyoming's weave. Documentaries filmed under cottonwoods, books penned on porch rockers, a podcast network amplifying voices from the margins. Guests came not just for rides but rebirth, leaving transformed. A CEO from Dallas trading corner offices for community co-ops. A poet from Brooklyn finding verses in the wind's low moan. Romance, that eternal ember, glowed undimmed. Anniversaries marked with private trails, wildflowers tucked in saddlebags. Wesley's sketches adorning cabin walls, Kyle's ballads strummed fireside, lyrics laced with their shared lexicon of survival and surrender. They'd adopted, first a boy from the res, wide-eyed at Mustangs, then a girl with Wesley's hazel gaze and Kyle's stubborn chin. Family forged in the forge of choice, holidays raucous with kin both blood and elected. Drama revisited in waves, as life demands. A drought 2 summers back, parching pastures and testing resolve. Kyle and Wesley rationing hay like hope. Co-op rallying with hauls from sister spreads. Betrayal flickered faint. A supplier jilking prices. Outed in quiet negotiation rather than noise. Conflict crested in personal tempests. Wesley's scare with pneumonia. Lungs compromised from city smog long past. Kyle pacing our halls till monitors beeped steady. Vowing anew in the sterile hush. No more solo rides, Kyle whispered, gripping hand pale but pulsing. Recovery wove them tighter. Mornings now with herbal teas and gratitude journals. Love's language refined to reverence. Evelyn's legacy lingered soft, her garden a pilgrimage site. Visitors tracing engraved stones, leaving notes of their own reckonings. Becca visited yearly, aunt to the kids, her art shows featuring ranch motifs. A bridge from venom to verdant. Humanism's thread ran deepest here. Forgiveness not as erasure but expansion. The ranch a classroom in complexity. Hate's origins unpacked, healing's labor honored. Climax, retrospective now, replayed in Milestone's mirror. The ranch's 20th, a gala under stars with string lights strung like constellations. Kyle spoke, voice gravel-honeyed. We started with a cruiser in the night, a neighbor's noose of narrowness. But look, love evicted fear, one guest, one gallop at a time. Wesley beside, arm linked, their children whooping from hay bales, the crowd a chorus of cheers. The end, humanistic to its marrow, unfolded in twilight's tender hold. Not by tragic tear but happy hush, laced with life's inevitable ache. As elders, Kyle and Wesley deeded the land to a trust, stewards in perpetuity, retiring to a cabin on the ridge. Days filled with grandkids on ponies, evenings with books and bourbon, gazes locked in the firelight's flicker. America, vast and vexed, stretched beyond. But here, in their patch, romance reigned. 2 men, once besieged, now beacons. Proof that drama yields to depth, conflict to connection, betrayal to belonging. The ranch endured, eviction-proof, a love letter etched in earth. Here, all hearts find harbor.